Do you want to be proactive about your health? Or do you just shrug your shoulders and figure you play the cards you're dealt? And the big question is, what difference does it make? Today, we're going to look at 10 things that contribute to the development of dementia and what, if anything, you can do about it. I'm Dr.Vickie Petz Kasper. I practiced obstetrics and gynecology for 20 years until I landed on the other side of the sheets as a very sick patient. When my own body betrayed me, I took a handful of pills to manage my disease and another handful to counteract the side effects. My health was out of control. Through surgery, medications, and lots of prayers, I regained my strength only to face another diagnosis. My doctor challenged me to make radical changes through lifestyle medicine. Now I feel great and I want to help you make changes that make a difference. Healthy Looks Great on You podcast takes you to many medical schools so you can learn the power of lifestyle medicine. If you're ready to take control of your health, you're in the right place. Whether you're focused on prevention or you're trying to manage a condition, I'll give you practical steps to start your own journey toward better health, because healthy looks great on you. This is episode 155, 10 must-know risk factors for dementia. Which ones can you alter and which ones you just got to accept? Here's the deal. Dementia isn't just one condition with one cause. It's more like a puzzle with pieces that fit together differently for each person. And some of these pieces are fixed, but others, well, they're more like clay that you can reshape. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. What if I told you that some of the choices you're making right now, today, could be tilting the scales either for or against your brain health? It's never too early or too late to make changes that affect your overall health, and that includes your brain health. So whether you're in your 30s or in your 60s, stick around. We're about to break down these 10 risk factors for dementia and what you can do about it. Number one on the list is age. Yeah, I know. There's not a thing in the world you can do about it. This is one you have to accept. And if you're a woman, aged 45, your chances of developing dementia during your lifetime are 1 in 5. If you're a man, it's 1 in 10. And even though I didn't include biologic sex in this list, clearly women are at increased risk. But there may be reasons for that you can alter. Bottom line is, age is the biggest risk factor for dementia, and the older you get, the greater the risk. In fact, the chances double every 5 years after age 65. To quote Andy Rooney, it's paradoxical that the idea of living a long life appeals to everyone, but the idea of getting old doesn't appeal to anyone. And that's generally true, and with good reason. I mean, it's not called over the hill for nothing. They say you should grow old gracefully. There's nothing graceful about some of the tolls the years take. And according to George Burns, you know you're getting old when you stoop over to tie your shoelaces and wonder, what else could you do while you're down there? George Burns, remember him? He lived to be 100 years old and was pretty healthy. We're going to come back to that, so be sure you listen until the end. But age is just one risk factor you have to accept. But while you're practicing acceptance, here's another one you can't control: family history. If someone in your family had dementia, then you are at increased risk. And if more than one somebody in your family had dementia, you're at even more risk. And you know what they say, you can't change the past, but you can change the future. You can start where you are and change the ending. And I want you to remember that quote as we talk through this, because even if you have a strong family history of dementia, your fate is not sealed, but it is at risk. So think about your family history. You tend to inherit your lifestyle from your family. Okay, not always, but a lot of our habits are ingrained at an early age. We sort of eat the same things and live in similar environments. Education levels and socioeconomic advantages or disadvantages are often generational. And those things are passed down, but they're not inherited like our genetic code. So I want to challenge you to start where you are and see if there's anything you can do to change the ending. Number 3 is similar to family, but not exactly the same. Genetics. Pop quiz. True or false? You can alter your gene. I want you to stay tuned next week because we are going to talk more about the genetics of Alzheimer's. The best way to not miss an episode is to subscribe to my newsletter. You can visit my website, www.healthylooksgreatonyou.com, or I put a link in the show notes. I share tips, recipes, and lots of other resources. So why don't you just push pause right now on the podcast and do it before you get busy or forget? Each week on the podcast, I take you to mini medical school. And this week, we're going to take a closer look at our DNA. Don't worry, it's a short course and it's never boring. Do not argue with me. Science is fun if you do it right. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. See if you can say that 3 times really fast. Deoxyribonucleic acid, deoxyribonucleic acid, deoxyribonucleic acid. Now you'll remember it, even if I did annoy you a little bit. I won't say it again. I'll just use the nickname, DNA. So what is it? It's like a double-stranded helix, and I'm sure you've seen pictures before. Looks like a twisted ladder. It's a molecule made up of 4 nucleotides, CGAT. That's cytosine, guanine, adenosine, and thymine. And these little dudes are held together by hydrogen bonds in different combinations. And here's the exciting part. Every cell in your body follows the code that is written into your DNA. It's like an instruction manual. And each person's DNA is unique. That is why human life is so sacred. Because this coding determines your eye color, your hair color, facial features, and ultimate height, as well as whether or not you're born a boy or a girl. And here's the deal. It's all determined at the moment of conception, when the egg is fertilized. Wow, we are indeed fearfully and wonderfully made. Now, inside of each cell, there's this little part called the nucleus, and that's where most of the chromosome-forming DNA lives. And all of this is foundational to understand genetics, but not only does your genetic code determine aspects of your health, but your environment, behavior, and lifestyle can impact genetic expression, meaning genes can be turned off, turned on, regulated up, regulated down, and we call that epigenetics. It can even happen in the womb before you're born. So you really are what you eat, how you act, and what you do. DNA can also be damaged, so gene expression is affected by age, exposures, environment, and other factors that we're going to look at. But since I mentioned environmental and exposure, let's move on to number 4 on the list of risk factors for dementia, and that is air pollution. I bet that surprised you. Turns out that pollution causes damage to the nervous system. Things like exhaust from cars in the city or wood burning in the country. And you want to know what else pollutes the air? Cigarette smoke. Smoking is a risk factor for dementia as well as a host of other conditions. Your mind may go straight to cancer, but it also increases the risk of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and even macular degeneration, which can lead to blindness. And it turns out that number 5 on the list is uncorrected hearing loss and uncorrected vision loss. Remember when I snorted about growing old gracefully? Well, yeah, I'm over here putting in my hearing aids and groping around for my glasses, and I don't think any of that is graceful. But I do it anyway. Now, I can't see without my glasses, so not optional. But uncorrected vision loss does increase the risk of dementia. And the worse the uncorrected vision loss, the worse the risk. But again, this only applies to people with uncorrected vision loss. And I think most of us wouldn't skip wearing our glasses or contacts, but I do see a lot of people skip on wearing hearing aids. Now, my husband would argue with this, but I can hear pretty well. He just talks really soft. And isn't that what everyone with hearing loss says? Quit mumbling. The deal is most people can get by with some hearing impairment, but it does increase the risk of dementia. Why is that? Well, maybe because you're not processing spoken words and that part of your brain isn't getting used and it shrinks along with everything around it. Or maybe your brain is actually devoting all of its energy to try and understand those mumblers and it neglects keeping the rest of the brain humming along at full speed. Experts don't really know exactly why hearing loss is associated with dementia, but it's felt to be responsible for 8% of cases. So get over it. Go to the audiologist, fork over the cash, and get your hearing aids. Your brain's worth it. Another theory about the impact of hearing loss is interference with social activity. I mean, if you can't hear, you can't participate in conversations or play games or just connect as well. And that leads us to number 6, social isolation. We're created to be connected. Isolation is associated with an increased risk of dementia as well as a whole lot of other health conditions. When I say we need each other, I mean we need each other. But I want to make a point. I've talked about the impact of loneliness on this podcast before, and I'll link those episodes in the show notes. It contributes to high blood pressure, heart disease, obesity, anxiety, depression, increased inflammation in the body, and alterations in the immune system. But listen, loneliness and social isolation are not the same. You can live alone and not be lonely, and you can be surrounded by people and feel loneliness. It is connection that matters. So phone a friend, text a friend, or even send an email. Even simple things like that matter, and they'll appreciate it. According to the National Institute on Aging, 1 in 4 people over the age of 65 experience social isolation. Now, I picture someone sitting home alone watching TV. Social isolation decreases the opportunity for engaging activities like playing cards, and it decreases the likelihood of staying fit. Think about how many pieces of home exercise equipment serve as just a place to hang your clothes. Going to the gym is a way to get the body fit and connect socially. People who are socially connected typically smoke and drink less. And of course, that depends on who you hang out with. But clearly, people who are trying to quit benefit from community. We all do. And speaking of quitting, many people observe dry January. And it's a great idea because number 7 is alcohol. Drinking alcohol does not increase your risk of Alzheimer's, but it may worsen it. But hold your beer. You might remember that Alzheimer's is a type of dementia, but not all dementia is Alzheimer's. There are several other types of dementia, and one uniquely occurs in people who consume heavier amounts of alcohol. It's even called alcohol-related brain damage. Here's what happens. Alcohol causes a loss of white matter. This is where the action happens. Neurons send signals to different parts of the brain. And with heavy alcohol use, the brain actually shrinks. And with less volume, there's less function. Alcohol can cause atrophy of the cells and inhibit the growth of new neurons via a process that we call neurogenesis. Alcohol ages the brain faster and contributes to other diseases that are associated with Alzheimer's dementia and other forms of dementia as well. These conditions are things like high blood pressure and heart disease. But wait, I thought drinking red wine prevents dementia. And this is a hot topic of research and debate. I mean, when you look at the Mediterranean diet and all those blue zones, most of them are in areas where grapes are grown. And when the fruit of the vine is ripe, well, you know. So the debate continues. And whenever there's controversy, it helps a bit to understand statistics. There's something called a J curve. And the theory was that teetotalers had a slightly increased risk of things like heart disease and brain disease, which, by the way, go together. Then it decreased with a glass or two of red wine a day, and then the swoop up in the letter J indicated an increased risk with heavy drinking. However, whether or not there is any benefit to consuming red wine is now being challenged. And many experts assert that there is no safe level of drinking. And if you've ever met my mother, you know she agrees wholeheartedly. But here's the deal. There is no question that excessive drinking increases the risk of, you name it. And it's especially harmful in midlife. Besides that, it increases your risk of everything I'm going to mention for number 8 on the list, which is head injury. And it's more common than you might realize. Over 23 million adults over the age of 40 have had at least their bell rung. That's slang for a concussion. It can be from falling, car wrecks, or sports injuries. And the more times your brain gets clunked, the greater the risk. That's what we call dose dependent. Preventable? Often. Wear a helmet if you're riding a bicycle, snowmobile, motorcycle, or snowboarding or skiing. And always, always, always wear your seatbelt. But here's where the rubber meets the road. And that's number 9, certain chronic medical conditions. And here's the deal. Anything that affects your blood vessels affects your heart and brain. So things like high blood pressure and diabetes, which damage blood vessels, they aren't good for the old ticker and they aren't good for the noggin either. Okay, I don't know about you, but I'm ready for some good news. You too, huh? Well, how about this? Everything that keeps your blood vessels healthy is affected by lifestyle. If you didn't know that was coming, I'd like to welcome you to your first episode of the Healthy Looks Great on You podcast. But seriously, not smoking, limiting alcohol use, maintaining physical fitness, social connectedness, managing stress and things like depression, as well as eating whole foods, that's your best weapon to prevent dementia. Protect your heart and maximize your overall health. Now, if you already have one of these conditions, hear me. Sometimes it's not necessarily too late. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. Now, let me give you this caveat. Sometimes it is too late and conditions are not reversible, and that's often the case. So prevention is super important. And also, it's felt that 40% of dementia cases can be prevented. That leaves 60% that cannot. Diabetes, high blood pressure, and obesity can be prevented, treated, and sometimes even reversed with lifestyle changes. I won't go into each one now, but there are lots of episodes that address these 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, as well as specific recommendations for each of these conditions. Just head over to my website, www.healthylooksgreatonyou.com, and browse for them. Included is an episode on preventing cognitive decline, and I'll link this one in the show notes. But before we say goodbye, let's say goodnight, because number 10 on the list is sleep. The first question is, does poor sleep increase the risk of dementia, or does dementia interfere with good quality sleep? And the answer is yes, both are true. On top of that, people have more difficulty sleeping as they age. And here's another conundrum. Do prescription medications for sleep increase the risk of dementia? I mean, if poor sleep is a risk factor, shouldn't we just head to the pharmacy and pick up a bottle of sleeping pills? Well, a recent study showed that certain sleeping medications increase the risk of dementia in white people to the tune of 79%. Now, that's in people who either often or almost regularly took sleeping medications compared to people who rarely or never took sleeping pills. And by the way, white people use way more medications for chronic insomnia. Medications like Xanax and Valium, Trazodone, Halcion, Dalmane, Ambien, and Restoril. They're prescribed to white people 10 times more often. But despite these risks, 10% of older adults regularly take sleeping medication. And guess what? Women are the biggest users. Okay, fine. What if you just take over-the-counter medications like Benadryl or diphenhydramine or Tylenol PM? The common ingredient, diphenhydramine, has some evidence that it's associated with a higher incidence of dementia. So what are you supposed to do if poor sleep increases your risk and medication increases your risk too? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Sleep is complicated, but it's essential. I'll share some previous links to episodes in the show notes if you struggle with sleep. I have some good news. Coming soon, I'm doing a month-long series on sleep, so make sure you stay tuned because I'm going to do a series of live webinars too. And if you go to my website, there are a couple of downloads that you can snag. 3 simple ways to improve your sleep and what to do if you're tossing and turning because your mind won't shut off. Okay, before we finish, what about George Burns? Well, he lived with good health and a sharp mind until he was 100 years old. Think he didn't have risk factors? Think again. He started smoking cigars when he was 14 years old, but never cigarettes, and like Bill Clinton's joint, he didn't inhale. He had 2 to 3 drinks a day and sometimes more, but he says he never got drunk. And he had a serious head injury after falling out of the bathtub. He adored his wife of 38 years and looked forward to joining her in heaven. In the meantime, he exercised daily. He swam, walked, and did sit-ups and push-ups. But maybe, just maybe, his biggest strength was the laughter he generated. He says he didn't tell jokes, but rather anecdotes and lies. But he was a funny guy. Now, I'm not saying that laughter will keep you from getting dementia or make you live longer, but it sure will put more joy in your life. So laugh and be healthy, because healthy looks great on you.
The information contained in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not considered to be a substitute for medical advice. You should continue to follow up with your physician or healthcare provider and take medication as prescribed. Though the information in this podcast is evidence-based, new research may develop and recommendations may change.